Medieval literature is a broad subject, encompassing essentially all written works available in Europe and beyond during the Middle Ages. The literature of this time was composed of religious writings as well as secular works. Just as in modern literature, it is a complex and rich field of study, from the utterly sacred to the exuberantly profane, touching all points in between. Works of literature are often grouped by place of origin, language, and genre. Languages. Since Latin was the language of the Roman Catholic Church, which dominated Western and Central Europe, and since the Church was virtually the only source of education, Latin was a common language for medieval writings, even in some parts of Europe that were never Romanized. However, in Eastern Europe, the influence of the Eastern Roman Empire and the Eastern Orthodox Church made Greek and Old Church Slavonic the dominant written languages. The common people continued to use their respective vernaculars. A few examples, such as the Old English Beowulf, the Middle High German Nibelungenlied, the medieval Greek Digenis Acritas, the Old East Slavic tale of Igor's campaign, and the Old French Chanson de Roland, are well known to this day. Although the extant versions of these epics are generally considered the works of individual poets, there is no doubt that they are based on their people's older oral traditions. Celtic traditions have survived in the Lay of Marie de France, the Mabinogion and the Arthurian cycles. Anonymity. A notable amount of medieval literature is anonymous. This is not only due to the lack of documents from a period, but also due to an interpretation of the author's role that differs considerably from the Romantic interpretation of the term in use today. Medieval authors often deeply respected the classical writers and the Church Fathers and tended to retell and embellish stories they had heard or read rather than invent new stories. And even when they did, they often claimed to be handing down something from an author instead. From this point of view, the names of the individual authors seemed much less important, and therefore many important works were never attributed to any specific person. Types of writing. Biography. The invention of biography can be attributed to this time period. It is explored by Andrea Walkden in her book Private Lives Made Public. The invention of biography in early modern England. Religious theological works were the dominant form of literature typically found in libraries during the Middle Ages. Catholic clerics were the intellectual center of society in the Middle Ages, and it is their literature that was produced in the greatest quantity. Countless hymns survive from this time period. The liturgy itself was not in fixed form, and numerous competing missals set out individual conceptions of the order of the Mass. Religious scholars such as Anselm of Canterbury, Thomas Aquinas, and Pierre Abelard wrote lengthy theological and philosophical treatises, often attempting to reconcile the teachings of the Greek and Roman pagan authors with the doctrines of the Church. Hagiographies, or lives of the saints, were also frequently written, as an encouragement to the devout and a warning to others. The Golden Legend of Jacobus de Voragine reached such popularity that, in its time, it was reportedly read more often than the Bible. Francis of Assisi was a prolific poet, and his Franciscan followers frequently wrote poetry themselves as an expression of their piety. Dies Ira and Stabat Mater are two of the most powerful Latin poems on religious subjects. Goliadic poetry was an art form used by some clerics to express dissent. The only widespread religious writing that was not produced by clerics were the mystery plays, growing out of simple tableaux reenactments of a single biblical scene. Each mystery play became its village's expression of the key events in the Bible. The text of these plays was often controlled by local guilds, and mystery plays would be performed regularly on set feast days, often lasting all day long and into the night. During the Middle Ages, the Jewish population of Europe also produced a number of outstanding writers. Maimonides, born in Córdoba, Spain, and Rashi, born in Troyes, France, are two of the best-known and most influential of these Jewish authors. Secular literature in this period was not produced in equal quantity as religious literature, but much has survived and we possess today a rich corpus. The subject of courtly love became important in the 11th century, especially in the Romance languages and Greek, where the traveling singers, troubadours, made a living from their songs. The writings of the troubadours are often associated with unrequited longing, but this is not entirely accurate. In Germany, the Minnesänger continued the tradition of the troubadours. In addition to epic poems in the Germanic tradition, epic poems in the tradition of the Chanson de Gesta and courtly romances in the tradition of the Roman courtois, which deal with the matter of Britain and the matter of Rome, achieved great and lasting popularity. The Roman courtois is distinguished from the Chanson de Gesta not only by its subject matter, but also by its emphasis on love and chivalry rather than acts of war. Political poetry was written also, especially towards the end of this period, and the Goliadic form saw use by secular writers as well as clerics. Travel literature was highly popular in the Middle Ages, as fantastic accounts of far-off lands entertained a society that, in most cases, limited people to the area in which they were born. The most prominent authors of Jewish secular poetry in the Middle Ages were Solomon ibn Gabirol and Yehuda Halevi, both of whom were also renowned religious poets. Women's literature. While it is true that women in the medieval period were never accorded full equality with men, some women were able to use their skill with the written word to gain renown. Religious writing was the easiest avenue. Women who would later be canonized as saints frequently published their reflections, revelations, and prayers. Much of what is known about women in the Middle Ages is known from the works of nuns such as Clare of Assisi, Bridget of Sweden, and Catherine of Siena. Frequently, however, the religious perspectives of women were held to be unorthodox by those in power, and the mystical visions of such authors as Julian of Norwich, Mechthild of Magdeburg, and Hildegard of Bingen provide insight into a part of the medieval experience less comfortable for the institutions that ruled Europe at the time. Women wrote influential texts in the secular realm as well. Reflections on Courtly Love and Society by Marie de France and Christine de Pizan continue to be studied for their glimpses of medieval society. For modern historical reflection, D.H. Green's historical work entitled Women Readers of the Middle Ages explores literacy and literature in terms of women in medieval society. The book has been reviewed as a radical reassessment of women's contribution to medieval literary culture, allegory. While medieval literature makes use of many literary devices, allegory is so prominent in this period as to deserve special mention. Much of medieval literature relied on allegory to convey the morals the author had in mind while writing. Representations of abstract qualities, events, and institutions are thick in much of the literature of this time. Probably the earliest and most influential allegory is the Psychomachia by Aurelius Clemens Prudentius. Other important examples include the Romance of the Rose, Everyman, Piers Plowman, Roman de Fourville, and the Divine Comedy. Notable literature of the period: Alexiad, Anna Komnena, Beowulf, anonymous Anglo-Saxon author, Sedmon's Hymn, Cantigas de Santa Maria, Galician, The Book of the City of Ladies, Christine de Pizan, Book of the Civilized Man, Daniel of Beccles, The Book of Good Love, Juan Ruiz, The Book of Marjorie Kemp, Brute, Layamon, Brute, Wace, The Canterbury Tales, Geoffrey Chaucer, The Cloud of Unknowing, anonymous English author, Consolation of Philosophy, Boethius, David of Sassoon, anonymous Armenian author, Decameron, Giovanni Boccaccio, The Dialogue, Catherine of Siena, Digenes Acritas, anonymous Greek author, The Diseases of Women, Trotula of Salerno, La Divina Commedia, Dante Alighieri, Dukish Horrent, the first extended work in Yiddish, Elder Edda, various Icelandic authors, Das Fleischsendelicht der Gothiet, Mechthild of Magdeburg, Gesta Danorum, Saxo Grammaticus, Heimskringla, Snorre Sturluson, Historia Ecclesiastica Gentis Anglorum, The Venerable Bede, The Knight in the Panther Skin, Shota Rustavelli, The Lay of Merida, France, The Letters of Abelard and Heloise, Libro de los Ejemplos del Conde Lucan Uruguay de Patronio, Don Juan Manuel, Prince of Villena, Ludus ter Antichrista, anonymous German author, Mabinogion, various Welsh authors, Metrical Dincentius, Irish onomastic poems, Ilmilion, Marco Polo, Le Morte di Arthur, Sir Thomas Malory, Nibelungenlied, anonymous German author, N.J. Alsager, anonymous Icelandic author, Parzival, Wolfram von Eschenbach, Piers Plowman, William Langland, Poem of the Cid, anonymous Spanish author, Proslogium, Anselm of Canterbury, Cuesta del Saint Graal, anonymous French author, Revelations of Divine Love, Julian of Norwich, Roman de la Rose, Guillaume de Loris and Jean de Man, Sadko, anonymous Russian author, Siviers, Hildegard of Bingen, Sikanon, Abelard, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, anonymous English author, The Song of Roland, anonymous French author, Spiritual Exercises, Gertrude the Great, Summa Theologiae, Thomas Aquinas, Tain Bo Quailnga, anonymous Irish author, The Tale of Igor's Campaign, anonymous Russian author, Tyrant Le Blanc, Jonot Martirel, The Travels of Sir John Mandeville, Tristan, Thomas d'Angleterre, Tristan, Berulle, Tristan and Iseult, Gottfried von Strasbourg, Troilus and Crusader, Geoffrey Chaucer, Waltharius, Younger Edda, Snorre Sturluson, Yvain, The Knight of the Lion, Creation de Troyes, specific articles, by region or language, Anglo-Norman literature, classical Arabic literature, medieval Armenian literature, Old Breton literature, Byzantine literature, medieval Bulgarian literature, medieval Catalan literature, medieval Croatian literature, Old and Middle Dutch literature, Old English literature, Middle English literature, Early English Jewish literature, medieval French literature, medieval German literature, medieval Georgian literature, medieval Hebrew literature, Icelandic literature, medieval Irish literature, medieval Italian literature, medieval Latin literature, Latin translations of the 12th century, Occitan literature, Old Norse literature, Pahlavi literature, medieval Persian literature, medieval Portuguese literature, medieval Serbian literature, medieval Scottish literature, medieval Spanish literature, medieval Welsh literature, by genre medieval poetry, medieval drama, medieval allegory, medieval mysticism, Fablerau, medieval travel literature, Arthurian literature, Alexander romances, Chanson de Gesta, Eddic poetry, Skaldic poetry, alliterative verse, miracle plays, morality plays, mystery plays, passion plays, by period early medieval literature, 10th century in literature, 11th century in literature, 12th century in literature, 13th century in literature, 14th century in literature,